Hi, I'm Austin Wintory, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook. Today I had the absolute pleasure of talking to somebody who has become a great friend and whose talent I just simply can't say enough towering praise of. The great legend in her own time, Laura Bailey. Of course, many folks know her as Abby in The Last of Us Part 2, Fiona in Tales from the Borderland, and just endless other games. We had recently collaborated on Stray Gods, the role-playing musical, which she is our lead actress for, playing the main character of Grace. And so it became a little bit of a challenge of how do I break down what to talk about in a quick 1 hour that we were able to steal of her time. She is a real force of nature as a performer. We got into her history with acting and what led from the world of animation into the world of video games and voice acting, and her process and how she thinks about her work and if she's able to play the games that she's in, and covered a lot of ground. It was a lovely chat. She's a wonderful person, and I'm sure you'll enjoy.
Did you lose your keys, Fred? I thought you'd be... What the... Calliope?
I'm so sorry.
Grace, you know that you're lost now. You've been given powers you don't understand.
You say you didn't kill Calliope. You have 1 week to prove it. What do I do?
Start singing.
So sorry you had to be here for this. I'm in the dark too as you're hearing this. But someone is dead and I'm losing my head. Like the goat said, this is my time, time to shine.
It's not a simple matter to kill an idol.
You want answers? Fight for them.
How could you throw that gauntlet at me? Could your heart shrivel any further?
You abandoned me to a terrible fate.
This is not about you. Enough!
True magic is a different and older power. Ready to face the music?
Only you can decide. Lost in a moment, lost in a song.
You're always looking out for me, Freddie. Best friends to the end, right?
Lost in a moment, lost in a song.
I wish I knew where I fit. Surely your life is just beginning.
Lost in a moment.
Very soon,
Lost in a moment.
the idols will be no more.
Lost in a moment.
Hi, Laura Bailey.
Oh, hey, Austin.
How are you? Flying in there, had to quickly set up the dinosaurs so that they were in the shot, because otherwise, wouldn't have been believably you.
Yeah, how would everyone know how much I love Tyrannosaurus Rex?
I mean, it's really good that you have there's a couple raptors in there, or at least one.
There's an Indominus Rex.
Ah, that is not a real one. I'm pretty sure that was made up by Colin Trevorrow.
That's a made-up dinosaur.
Yeah. Well, I promised that I would not talk your ear off, which is a new thing for us. Yeah, we're not. I've come to convince myself that talking to someone and then walking away was having a conversation. So you've very graciously indulged a whole crap load of that the last couple of years. Of course, I super selfishly want to just ask you about all the incredible adventure that was Stray Gods, but we're gonna zoom out a lot, and make this just the Laura hour. So, yeah.
But I'm more than happy to talk a lot about Stray Gods because I'm a huge fan.
Well, that's very kind, but no. I mean, look, I as much as that's tempting, there is just so much to cover, and so sometimes I do this in a way that feels a little methodical, like very biographical, kind of walk me through the steps. And it's less fun, but in this case, it's actually interesting because I don't even really know the answer to when the exact moment all this got started for you is. You just kind of, in my mind, as a person in the industry and also just as a player, I don't really know where you first appeared on my radar. It's like you were always there, but there is some part where you must have come into existence. So
I was
where,
born.
yeah, you just were. You kind of just appeared in it all, and it was glorious. But what is your perspective on that? Where did acting begin for you as a viable profession?
Oh gosh. Well, I knew I wanted to be an actor when I was in high school.
And
And
how come? Like, what prompted that?
I I just was doing theater and I loved it so very much. It didn't seem like a possible career. I've said this before. This is like the dumbest trigger thing that happened, the dumbest catalyst, but it really was. It was, this
Hit
was,
me. We'll
I was
see.
in
We'll
high
put it on
school.
the board on list
Okay,
of
so
dumb
I was in
catalysts.
high school in the age of Dawson's Creek. And I didn't watch Dawson's Creek, but I was watching it.
You're amongst friends. You can admit there's no
If
shame in
I had
anything.
watched it, my sister watched it. I did not watch Dawson's Creek. But I was watching an interview with Katie Holmes, who was my age. And she was just like a normal chick who had just started acting, and she was doing like a play at her high school, and she got cast in Dawson's Creek, and she didn't know if she was going to be able to do both because her play needed her at her school. And just hearing it talked about in those terms of like she was in the exact same place that I was, it made it seem very possible to do that as a profession. And I watched the interview, and immediately after it was done, I was like, I need to be doing this for real. And like called my mom. I was like, I need to find an agent. And I talked to my theater director at school, and I was like, I want to find an agent. And everyone was like, wait till you're out of school. You need to wait till you're out of high school. So I did, and started studying theater in college. And then within like the first year of doing that, I was doing like theater in Dallas and everything, and I got an agent from that show.
Presumably a Dallas-based agent.
Yes, it was.
Is that a thing? Is that a viable? I mean, obviously, in your case, things led onto the path, but
yeah,
what is the connectivity? Is that like a feeder city in a weird way that I don't know about, like in an unexpected way?
Texas is a right to work state. So it's a little easier to break into, I think, because you don't have to, it can be harder with union restrictions, like getting into the industry, right?
Right,
but
yeah, hitting those minimum thresholds.
Just working on jobs because there's nothing to stop you really from doing that. So yeah, it was easier to like kind of jumpstart it. And at the same time that I got my theatrical agent, that same play that I was doing the show with somebody who was a voice actor who his name was Kent Williams, and he worked on Dragon Ball Z. And he asked if I would come in and audition for Funimation. And so I did, and ended up getting cast on Dragon Ball Z. So at the same time that I was like pursuing film and television, I was just also getting voiceover work, but it wasn't connected. Like my agent wasn't representing me in that at that time.
Right. One wasn't necessarily feeding the other, like success in one begets the other kind of thing.
Right. And at the time I didn't realize that I wanted to be like a voice actor. That didn't happen until I moved out to California. And that was like, how old was I when I moved out to California? 27 when I moved out. And that's when I actually realized like, oh, I want to be a voice actor. Cause in Texas, it was like, I loved working at Funimation. I loved doing what I was doing, but there was really only one place that you could be doing that in Dallas. And that was Funimation. Right.
Are they based there? Have I never known that?
I don't know. Yes, they are. But I don't know if you didn't know that.
Well, yes. Clearly, I did not know that, but yes, I wasn't actually asking you earnestly. What do I know? Do you have how up to date is your Austin facts index?
Let me check my notes.
for real. We really should have pre-screened ahead of time the things that I know so that you're up to speed. I had no idea that they were based there. What a fortuitous, because I mean that's a pretty big umbrella of work opportunities for anybody that can hack it, I would think.
Yeah, and it was great to break into the voiceover industry doing that because I started, fresh out of high school, so I really got trained there.
Mm.
And getting trained in anime is like boot camp for an actor. It's all of the normal voice acting things, but also you're very restricted on your timing of what you're allowed to do. So it makes you be a little bit more creative with your choices to make
You mean
it work.
specifically because, just for context, because you're doing a dub and there is no, like, the animation is already existing. You have a way tighter parameters, in other words, just for the sake of anyone who might not, or also in case I don't understand.
You have to match your performance to a picture that's already been animated to a performance that already has been done. You're taking a puzzle, breaking it apart, and rebuilding it again, right?
How much of a consumer of that were you? Like, how kind of fluent were you in just the language of that and the style of it? Or was it one of those that it was a crash course and a whole new...
Well, I did it for like 10 years before I moved out to California. So, I mean, I all I knew was like Pokemon and Sailor Moon and
going in,
audition. That's all I had ever like seen that I like realized was anime,
Sure.
But yeah, it was a very fast learning curve, jumping in there and
it's just such a different thing in the world of animation and voiceover. It's such a specific kind of thing that I would imagine. I just can't really imagine sort of that being your entry point. It's I don't know. It seems like it's a bit of a cultivator. There's a lot of folks that kind of seemingly have they've cut their teeth in that little kind of specific sub industry.
Yes. There's a lot of amazing people that have come out of like starting in anime. Troy,
right.
Started, yeah.
But who the hell is he?
We all started in that. So
there's something you kind of said offhandedly and made it sound so nonchalant, but it feels like it must surely not be, where you were like, I need an agent. And then I kind of got an agent. Like, at least for composers, that's a pretty big milestone, because the rule of thumb has always tended to, I know it works a little differently for actors, and that there's also, commercial agents versus voice agents versus theatrical, or, on camera agents, all that kind of thing. Whereas composers tend to just be, if you write music and need it in a thing, we'll cover it. It's a lot more all encompassing. But it's a kind of a career milestone for a composer to get an agent, because they're not really useful to somebody who's just starting. They don't really help broker connections. Most of them don't, or they're just not in a position to help, because any job they could get you pretty much could get yourself. So that the rule of thumb becomes, by the time you need an agent, they'll be knocking on your door, and you really don't need one before they're coming to you. It seems different though, but it I don't know, because you would have been like around 20 or something based on that story you were saying, right? Like pretty young.
My agent, in Texas, and it was much easier to get an agent in Texas than it was when I came out to California. And I mean, I'd been doing voiceover for 10 years, and I had a pretty decent name for myself in that industry, and still, like, I came out to California and I didn't get an agent for almost a year.
Right. I guess it's that small fish in the big pond transition, right?
Yes, 100%. Like, my agent, well, I tried to get signed with Travis's agency and they said no. And then I know. And then I met with SBV, who is my current representation, and like when I met with them, they said, yes, we'll sign you because you've been recommended to us by some of our clients who we're big fans of, but we don't know who you are. I can't guarantee we're going to be able to get you any work. Like, good luck.
Clearly a gamble worth having made.
Yes. And the first audition I did was I went in for a voice match for Tinkerbell and ended up booking it. Like, that was right out the gate. And so it was like, oh, okay, you can work. Let's keep going with that.
Amazing. So something else, I remember we had dinner not that long ago, and you said, I can't remember how it came up, but the question was put to you of what would be one of your favorite games, just as a gamer, just like one of those and I think you said Dragon Age, which was sort of and I, not least of which that David was at the dinner with us.
I know.
You're either a very shrewd politician who knows how to,
I love that game. I love it so much. That's why when I found out it was David doing this game, I was like, what? Yeah.
Well, and that was the thing. It came across very genuine because what I loved is, especially with those BioWare style games, you can always tell who really let them get under their skin, where it becomes this waterfall of like, oh my God. And then at this part, I mean, it's like, how do you choose romance between this person and that person? And it's just because this person becomes this sort of explosion of nerdy, uncontrollable energy. That's how I get with Mass Effect in a big way without any provocation. And so I saw that and I hadn't realized just how much it had its hooks in you. And so I'm asking all this as preface to like getting into voiceover, and because you made it sound like that wasn't necessarily the thing you targeted early on, but you must have been a gamer in parallel to all this.
Yes.
So like on some level, it was on your radar because you're playing these games that have these actors in them and thinking, is that a thing? Like, where did that start to gel as not because voice acting in anime is a whole other ballgame. So
Sure.
Where did this start to become a thing?
Like, I thought I wanted to, like, I was doing anime in Texas and I thought I wanted to do film. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I was really trying to make that happen. And then when I came out to California, and it was like this whole world of voiceover kind of opened up, and I saw like all of these other opportunities, all of these other things you could do with it. And really, that's when I started doing more and more interactive work. And
what made that open up to? I mean, like, what was the thing that made you see that? Because obviously, especially if you were already a gamer by that point, I assume.
I think, it's that I started at Funimation when I was 18, and like they knew me for the voices that I did, and they knew me for the performances. Like they kind of, I had this circle, a little bubble around me of like, this is what I do, right? And going into a new city, not only a new environment like that, but every single project is at a different studio with a different group of people. So you're constantly showing who you can be over and over and over again with these new editions. And it's a challenge. Number one, it feels like you're pushing yourself forward. And also you're constantly recreating something new for yourself. And it just creatively felt so much more fulfilling.
Was there the first games that you booked, was that just one of those that after kind of getting into that world of voiceover, and presumably there's like casting directors that are gonna, once you're kind of in the Rolodex and proven reliable and that things tend to kind of self-perpetuate past a certain point. But was there a specific moment game wise or gig wise that seemed to be that like, this is now going to be, well, actually baked into the premise of this question is that games are kind of central to your work, but you still do so much animation, and never mind, it's like Critical Role, like that's probably the biggest chunk of your life in any given month or whatever, in terms of just by number of hours. So I shouldn't even assume that games really became the focus but because that's what I know, and we're on a game podcast. But so actually, let me back it up then. Did at some point it feel like games had become the central part of your life, or has it always just been one of several parallel lanes, and it's hard to really name one central thing?
I feel like for the most part, like the bulk of my work is in video games more than animation. And I mean, granted, in these last few years, Critical Role has definitely, ramped up, and it's like,
surely that's the overwhelming majority of.
Yeah, it's like two
now,
full-time
week over week
jobs with video games
Right.
and with Critical Role. Yeah, it's which is not a bad thing. I love both so very much.
No, but I mean, it's very clear because Critical Role is so all-consuming between just the sheer amount of filming that you all do, and then there's obviously the panels and the Comic Cons and all those kinds of things. I was amazed. I honestly, when we were getting ready to, dive in full speed on Stray Gods, I remember thinking, I hope, because it was very clear how many sessions we were going to need. And we were kind of doing the math and being like, oh, it's going to be 6 million. So that's good to know.
Oh, that's okay. Let's see.
Yeah,
Look at
it's 5,000 lines per week. I was a little worried because I just thought she's pretty booked. Like she is an in-demand person and has her own endeavor that's at the top of that pile of her own making with, so yeah, 2 full-time jobs is seemingly a pretty accurate description because somehow we did manage to. You were very generous in your time with us, and yet it's not like the other stuff stopped in the middle of it. So yeah,
I think it actually like we lucked out the timing of it. And I know this is terrible to say, but it was during the pandemic, right? When we kind of and during that time we weren't filming any mocap on any projects, so like it actually worked out perfectly because I wasn't driving back and forth to Culver City or Playa del Rey to work on that during the day, so I got to like actually like work, have a better
I think
schedule.
that actually played to our favor a lot of different ways. It's the same thing even with just the fact that we recorded everything over Zoom when it was never the plan. It was always to be that we would converge on the studio together. Yeah. Joy and I would be in the booth, you and any other cast. And we also had assumed that we would have a lot of sessions with multiple actors singing together. And then just as it got more and more granular, and the pandemic forced our hand, I don't know that we could really honestly have done it the way we were originally picturing. Just the sheer amount of file management that I had to do to keep track of where we were and what we had recorded. If I hadn't been at my desk during those sessions with all that stuff up on my screen while the Zoom call was open, I don't even know. It just would have had to approach it so differently that in hindsight, it all was very lucky. But anyway, so I'm getting ahead of myself. Spoilers, Stray Gods. So I guess then, knowing that games at some point, what started as overwhelmingly animation kind of got supplanted by a dominance in games in terms of just what you were doing. What was the thing that kind of flipped that? Was there a specific thing that kind of became the now this is going to take over moment, like a specific role or a specific game? Or did it just sort of slowly over time kind of crossfade?
I think it was slowly over time. I think it was the man, I don't know. I'm trying to think, like it was right around the time that I was working on like Final Fantasy, I think. It was when I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be what I'm doing. But like when I moved out to California, it was right as motion capture was starting to become a thing in video games, and I kind of happened into it right on that birthing of that technology. So,
and I assume that kind of tucked into that comment is it's something in which you felt very comfortable, like you clicked with that as a like a form or a medium
as
or whatever.
And it fulfilled that part of me wanting to, act with my body and my face in addition to voice acting. Motion capture really does, it's everything. And it feels theatrical at the same time. So like all of the things that I loved were just like put into this one place. And yeah.
Which was the literal first time you did that?
The very first motion capture project I did was a game that never even got made. And
what a recurring story in the game industry.
It was a Castlevania game that ended up being shelved because they were working on 2 Castlevania projects at the same time, and ours did not make the cut. But we shot it in Japan for a couple months, and I shot. Who all was working on that?
I mean, it must have felt like a really huge deal if this was your first time doing this.
It was with Troy and Travis.
I mean, Troy. To be fair, Troy. To paraphrase Troy himself, Troy will be at the opening of an envelope. So He's not. He has really no ability to say no to projects.
This part of our careers, you know what I mean? Like it was early on. This was the first motion capture project he did as well.
Oh wow!
And Travis and I think Yuri Lowenthal was working on that as well. It was a while ago.
That's I find that amazing because I know that for actors that do a lot of film and TV, at least theater, I can totally see clicking with motion capture, especially kind of like black boxy type theater where you're doing a lot of the lifting in your mind just to be able to do the performance.
Mm-hmm.
But I've seen film and TV people that are accustomed to elaborate costumes and makeups and set and things that are helping to really kind of get you to a starting position before you've even stepped onto set to perform. Like so much of that's doing a lot of the work for the sake of the audience. That it seems like it would be one of those, you either love it or hate it as an actor, that motion capture would feel really off-putting, or now I get to play.
Yeah, it feels like play to me. It feels like a big, and I think that's honestly the connection. That's why like Critical Role, that world of RPG in that respect is the same in my brain because it's all just
imagination basically.
Yeah. You're 5-year-old playing, lava monster.
Right. Or T-Rexes or Indominus Rexes. Yeah, it's so interesting. It's also like, I don't think I've ever asked Troy, for example, about that. Is there a specific moment that seemed to kind of be the tipping point? Because from my point of view, he was one of those kind of like in the trenches actors, and then the double whammy of BioShock and The Last of Us coming out just wildly altered everything. And it was like not a lot of additional voices or Soldier 3 kind of stuff after that, I mean, it really, so it seems like such a definitive line in his career. That's what I was sort of teasing at, is if you felt like there was a moment that did, because you've had like, a handful like seemingly all the time, but realistically, at least from your perspective of when you would actually record these things, it's like every year or every couple of years, there's another one of these that seemingly one could hang your hat on in that way, as like, now it's a whole new thing moving forward. But at some point there has to have been a first one of those. And that's why I was curious if you had a perception of what that might be.
It kind of all happened at the same time. So, looking back now, like World of Warcraft is a big thing that I was super stoked about when I got it, because it was already such a big franchise. Final Fantasy, huge franchise. Like that was one of my dreams, is to get to work on one of those games. And then it was, I was working on Uncharted at the same time that I was working on Gears and Spider-Man, and we were shooting all of those.
So it's just like, it's literally, that's so funny how it is so, there seems to be a recurring story with folks where it's like a few things kind of come over the line and they're all cooking in parallel, sort of unbeknownst to each other. And
they come out at different times. So they, they stack, but yeah, it was a busy 5 years.
Has there ever been one where, it's funny, I have a lot of questions flood to my, I swear I don't intend for these to ever feel kind of interviewee, but you're just giving me a lot of things I'm curious about. Has there ever been one where you booked it and then as it became clear what you needed to do or what the character consisted of in the writing, where you found yourself going, ooh, like, this is now actually scary, or am I the right fit for this? Like, now that I see what it is, because obviously famously actors in games especially are very often sort of in the dark about what it's even going to be when through the auditioning process or the booking process. And it's only really once you're in it that you even know what it is a lot of the time. Did it ever kind of unfold and go, oh my God, like this is acting is acting, but this is somehow maybe a bridge too far? Or do you ever have those,
Um,
or you're like, honestly, I'm just kind of infallible?
no, 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 not at all. Um, I've certainly, worked on projects that I go, oh, did I get in over my head? This is a lot more difficult than I expected it to be. Um, whether it's, just like accent work, like, or,
Sure.
that kind of.
The thing that was in my head that made me ask was if there was something that if there was ever a place a character would need to go, whether that's like emotionally or
Oh no, that shit's fun. I like if it has to go. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? I think for the most part in my life, I'm very level-headed. I don't get angry. I don't really get that sad. I'm just kind of like neutral with my emotions in
the
everyday
Jerry
life.
Seinfeld of actors. You're
Yeah,
just
I'm
like,
just kind of like
kind of
chill.
always.
But so acting is like this really great excuse to explore the extremes of emotions that I don't see too often in my own personality.
That's It's funny because my experience of you it is totally scans with that. You're so like not prone to drama. But what's interesting is that is very opposite the kind of actor cliche of like what makes an actor often able to harness emotions is that they're an uncaged animal of emotional madness all the time, and it's just a matter of like wrapping your arms around it. Is that like are you super atypical, or am I just like
I don't know.
misinformed?
I feel like I don't know.
Maybe it's a
I feel like
voice
most
actor
voice
thing.
actors that I know are pretty even keel. Like certainly, big
I definitely
personality.
saw. I mean, like even just in the case of the folks within our sort of stray gods, which is, I mean, but that's kind of, thank you, Troy. That was basically the creme de la creme of all voice actors. But like Mary Elizabeth McGlynn is a perfect example of somebody that seems completely and totally unflappable. Like she just nothing made her even flinch. It seems like
Oh, she's so good. But also Mary, I mean, if you're talking in terms of like acting, Mary feels so deeply. Like she's one of the most
oh
like
yeah,
genuinely deeply emotional people in a beautiful way. Like if a piece of music is beautiful, she will be crying. If she feels everything so much. And I think that is one of the things that makes her such a strong actor and director. She's so empathetic.
right. Yeah, no, it's definitely that unflappable quality doesn't mean sort of emotionally dead.
Doesn't mean stoicism, right? It's
Yeah, exactly. Um, but it's just I don't know. It's interesting. I suspect part of it also might be that so often you all are put in a position of just you have to go in and get it done. So, um, uh, I'm trying to think of the right word. Like time is not necessarily on your favor, and there's not a lot of playground of let's really kind of find it and experiment and
right.
like
It depends on the project. I feel like it's funny, the further you get in your career, the more time you get to find the moments, right? When you're starting out, for sure, you're kind of expected to get to a place emotionally very quickly. Um,
what about in
because
terms of beyond the emotional side,
the
just like
character,
the
everything, like
yeah, like
you don't know much about a project, people aren't going to fill you in very much. You just go in, you do your job. And then the more that you like the bigger roles or whatever you want to look at it as, suddenly like doors start opening up as far as like creatively you get to be more a part of the process.
mm,
It's a wonderful thing, but I wish it started earlier. As an actor, like it would have been nicer to have, but um I obviously love being a part of the process.
I certainly witnessed that. Something else that's sort of just random. It's like a trivia thing that I'm just curious about, though. Is I remember once it was when they were shooting Last of Us 2. I remember one day Troy texted me after they had wrapped for the day, and I gathered later that they had been doing the museum scene with Ashley, and it was because Troy said something like, "I have never felt more in sync with my character ever before than I did today." Like it's like he truly lost internally where the separation was between Joel and himself. He wasn't like driving the car of the performance. He just kind of disappeared in it, and that's actually rare because he's like anti-method and stuff. He's like,
yeah.
yeah. So I was curious if you've ever had a feeling like that, where you thought, I just really became this person on a level that I didn't see coming, or that, or whatever, anything in that vein. Because I imagine that's pretty rare.
That is like the majority of when I'm acting. That's kind of how my mind goes. I don't like, if I look back and think about like scenes that we filmed or something, I don't think of it in terms of what I was thinking. I just have like a memory of that character doing something. Like it don't.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I did. So I don't. Yeah.
It's not like you're not. In other words, not about choices. It's not like you're sitting there going, "I could do this. I could do," like some chef that's like, it needs a bit more of that and a little, and I need to like add, some pepper to kind of even this thing out. It's not methodological in that way at all.
Right. I mean, there is that, because I mean, you are hitting, your marks, and you're hitting the beats that need to be hit in the scene and everything. But I don't know, like there's a weird meshy part of my brain or something that like it still is thinking the technical things, but like I'm emotionally in a place for the thinking about the character. I'm not even thinking about the character. It's just kind of like you're living as a character in that.
That must have been something that appeared only after a certain amount of time, I would think, right? Like you have to have a certain just base level of kind of confidence to get, or maybe, I don't know, was it always sort of like that? Like even when you think back to those theater days?
I don't know when that started happening. It did start happening more and more over time. I feel like it happens more like with mocap than it ever did with anything on camera, like film wise. I feel like it's more like a theatrical sort of thing, right?
I mean, it would make sense to me, but this is why I'm asking, because it's funny how on some levels as a composer, I very much relate to actors, because I also would throw cinematographers in that we're trying to make tangible a thing that's highly abstract. You're trying to make something real that a person can look at or listen to. But when you talk about it beforehand, it feels like you're talking about nothing.
It's so weird. And it's so weird to try to put it into words, like what a process, or what your process is as a composer or as an actor. Like, where does it come from? I don't necessarily know. It just
no, I totally get that. It's not an unsatisfying answer for you to kind of fish for it. I don't want it to feel like I'm putting you on the spot, because I totally get not having an answer. It was one of those, like early on, I think it's the mark of a student or like a amateur or like barely a professional, that they have this list of, oh, well, actually, so then you start with this and then you need to do that. And then it feels super mechanical and plotted and calculated. And like I remember my all-time hero, Jerry Goldsmith, the greatest composer ever. I remember my agent repped him the last 15 years or so of Jerry's life. And he had been a fan. Jerry was a major composer since the like 1960, basically. And so my agent had been a huge fan of him for years before he had the opportunity to represent him in the last years of his life. And he said one time they ended up on a plane together. So he made a list of every score that he was this huge fanboy for, that he wanted to ask Jerry about, like Planet of the Apes and Patton and the original Star Trek, the motion picture, and Alien and all these movies, where he was like, I want to get all the inside story. And he said he sat down and they had this like transatlantic flight, and he was like, okay, first. And he said Jerry's answers for all of them was like, I don't know. It just felt like the right thing for the job. Like, I don't have it. And he said it was like the most unsatisfying flight of his entire life, because Jerry had no brilliant, it was just
It
You do
just
the
felt
job.
right.
Yeah.
It just felt right.
But I don't know. Of course, when he told me that, he told me that story like 10 years ago, and I was like, oh man, but now I get it a lot more. Because
But it's so
yeah,
cool how everybody works differently. I love how everybody's brain processes, what is necessary, or they can get to the same place. Like they can pull the same thing from an audience with a completely different approach. You
yeah.
know what I mean? It's so cool, and it's like it's a mark of like a really good director to understand how each of your actors works and can get to that place, right? Because you're going to have to say different things to different people to give them the notes to get there.
Actually, it's funny that you say that because I remember before I'd even met you for the first time, talking with Troy about working on Shadow of War, where he was directing for the first time, or like not necessarily the first
Yes.
time, but like it was a big undertaking for him. And he was saying how he learned so much about directing from your feedback to him as a director, because you had very different needs and you were clear on ways to help you. And they were kind of the opposite of what he would have been asking for.
100%. And we worked together so many times on a stage, like even with him not being a director, but yes, as a director as well, where our approach is so very different. And he likes to talk about a scene a lot before we do it. And what are you thinking? And what am I thinking? And how are we going to get to this like moment in the scene? Whereas me, I don't want to know. I'm like, don't tell me what you're thinking. If I'm having a conversation with you right now, I don't know what you're thinking. I'm like, how is that? Don't say anything. So it's so funny but it like ends up working so well together. I mean, we work together so much because like it works,
Well, and he also admired that you were like, you were not ambiguous. You were like, stop it. Like
And I wouldn't do that with any director but Troy, because he's my brother and I can do that with him.
But it's so great to me. It's a sign of respect when you're working with somebody and they're a total straight shooter. They don't feel like they're walking on eggshells, where they go, more important than how you feel and how I feel is the thing we're trying to make. And so let's cut the bullshit so we can just get to it, and get to work and try to make it great. And some people just really struggle with that. In my limited experience, at least, they will let things get past their threshold for where they think it is best, for the sake of sparing the feelings of people, and not just trusting that those people are more durable emotionally than that. So in any case, all right. So I can't not ask about your experiences on The Last of Us, because that's just so, it's just so inseparable from, like, if someone, it will be forever when you go on a when you either like have your beautiful in bed surrounded by grandchildren moment, or you go on a wild killing spree and we have to write the article about you. It will invariably be that thing in parentheses that shows up after your name. It's just it's so inseparable from your kind of body of work. And it's one of those that it's impressive, because obviously you've been in a thousand things. You may very well be recording something as we're talking right now, and I just somehow can't perceive it.
What's going on?
Yeah, you're very quickly like taking notes, and yeah. So, but just step me through the process. I mean, especially I'm also curious about how you prepare for things, and how much, because obviously what we were just talking about, you like to kind of be in the moment and rely on your instincts and a lot of that, but you also do prepare. I mean, in certain roles I would think demand more preparation than others, and this was a big one. This was a lot. I'm sure a lot of shooting days, and just and the game hangs on this character. So just tell me the story, basically, because I actually have never asked you really about it. I just know that you were subjected to a lot of bullshit, and so I've always been very like biased on the ridiculousness of certain lovely people on the internet. And I played the game and was completely blown away but I don't know much of your perspective on what it was like to kind of take this apart and put it together, and even how it started or any of it really. I'm sure you
Yeah.
did 1,000 interviews, and I'm sorry that I'm sure most of this I can
No,
find on the internet, but indulge me if I'm
I don't even know where to start. Oh God. Like Neil didn't want me to be Abby. I
good.
think he was thinking more like Dina for me.
Mm,
And like when we like knew, obviously, like I'd worked with Neil before this, and we were at I think it was like a Naughty Dog Christmas party or something. I can't remember.
sounds
And
like a TV special, a Naughty Dog Christmas party.
yes, and Ashley and I heard, that knew Dina was a character, and so we were like, went over to Neil and we're like, we could be girlfriends, we could be great, we could be we have a really good chemistry. Just trying to like talk him into casting me. And so the auditions
What a
came up.
cliche like actor party
So
moment.
so stupid. We were goofing, but the auditions for Abby came up before the auditions for Dina did, and I went in and read for it, even though Neil was like, I don't think I want her to be that part. Um, and it was so obviously the part was so good. And as soon as I
How
auditioned
much
for
did you
it,
know? I mean, like, what was your
it was,
information to go in?
it was a lot of it was the scene. It was
Like the golf
the
scene.
whole scene was. I mean, it wasn't what it ended up being, but it was it was enough.
How did it inform you that you already had such a relationship with Troy? I mean, because I'm assuming that the first time that was sent over, it was all new information, and so
And well, the first time it was sent over, it was not all the character names were different, and so you didn't know who it was. But I was like, this is Joel, right? This
yeah.
guy, this is Joel. Um, and yeah, obviously it helped that I was comfortable with Troy, that we'd worked together enough that it was comfortable to get to a place in even the audition that it could go to. Um, uh, yeah, and so that happened, and I ended up getting cast as Abby. Um,
Did it feel like a slam dunk? I mean, I've talked to friends who booked parts after feeling like they totally blew a read, and vice versa. They were convinced it went great, and it didn't. How did you walk away from that feeling?
I mean, I walked away from it feeling like it was. I mean, it felt like a good audition, you know. Um, like when you leave, when you've done a scene for an audition and like you feel still like emotionally very raw just from that, then it feels like, okay, that it didn't feel like an audition, it felt like we were filming something, right?
Right. Just straight into work, in other words.
Yeah. And so I was very happy to get that role, but it was a lot of pressure with that because um, of everything that happens with that role. And
I mean, it must have been communicated to you pretty immediately. This halfway through the game, we're gonna flip the script, and that, like, I just can't really even begin to imagine how to digest that information in order to start putting together.
well, I didn't know it was going to be like an entire half of the game. I didn't know exactly where the scenes, how they were going to mix together, because they were all being filmed at the same time and they were on the same day. So I didn't know if it was going to be a back and forth sort of thing. I didn't realize it was going to be like play as Ellie and then switch over and get to do it all again as Abby and like understand the consequences of the actions even more. So yeah, no, I mean, there was pressure there because Ashley and Troy are so unbelievably talented, and I was such a huge fan of the first game that I put a lot of pressure on myself to
I
like
don't doubt
live
it.
up to that, so that it would, and I was constantly like, I would come home and be like, I'm not doing a good enough job. Because it was funny, because the way the story was, it was like having two different projects being filmed at the same time. Um, I never saw Team Ellie.
Right.
We were filming.
Interesting.
We were always just like doing our thing, and the only times I shot with Ashley were those like few scenes where we had the
Yeah, sort
overlap.
of the bookends of the thing.
Yeah. So I didn't know what they were doing. I knew a little bit of the storyline, but that wasn't like everything that Neil was. That's not what we were focusing on when I was filming.
I can imagine that helping in a way, because it sort of cuts out the clutter of, uh, you know, you have such a specific story that's being told. It is almost a separate game entirely.
Mhm.
And to not have other extraneous stuff outside of it, I would think could be helpful, especially
Yeah.
if you're like, don't overshare, like on the Shadow of War stuff. It
Sure.
probably good to just be able to dial in, and it's almost as if the whole first half of the game is irrelevant, in a way.
Kind of, yeah, kind of. It was also really great then, as a player, as a fan of the series, to like get to go in, and it's all so fresh when I'm playing the game, to get to like see everything that they were doing, and all the performance that Ashley was giving was just so good. That game, as soon as I got done playing, I just sat and cried in my chair for like 30 minutes afterwards, because I was so blown away.
It is a high mark of the medium. I mean, it's one of those. I was actually completely baffled by the polarizing response, because I just thought you'd have to be insane to not, like, you have to be completely clueless to not see what this is. You don't have to like it, but to be like, oh, it's crap, or just write it off. I'm not one of those that says, well, how hard all these people work, because people can work hard and it can, like, they cannot be good at their job. So it's like, no matter how hard you work, it could sometimes still, like, if you're incompetent and work really hard, that doesn't make it better as a final product. It just means you worked really hard, and all sympathy to you, but like, it doesn't automatically make it good.
Right.
So I'm not even sympathetic to the argument of thousands of people put in a lot of work, in terms of, therefore it deserves automatic praise or something. It's just that a lot of people worked really hard and did amazing work, and you don't have to like where the story went, or you don't have to like the performances or the characters or whatever. I, for what it's worth, thought every pixel of this thing was. I was just so exhausted by the end because I was so invested.
It is. It's always surprising to me when people like say to me that they've on their 11th or 12th playthrough of the game. I'm like, how are you doing that to your soul? I hurt so much.
Yeah, no, that's almost like, we should keep an eye on that person. It's a little scary. But yeah, it felt like everybody gave it everything. Everyone involved, between you and Troy and Ashley and everybody, obviously, Shannon, and there's all these other incredible performers in it. Everybody clearly gave it everything. And like the Naughty Dog folks and Neil, and it's just, there's nothing, no one didn't sacrifice for it. But still, that doesn't guarantee anything. But it just somehow magically came together. It's just, I don't know how, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, because I know you've had a few years of talking about it, and there's plenty of other things in life, but rarely have I seen someone given more unfair of a treatment. And it impresses me, the thick skin that is demanded of people who invariably have to be the kind of public face of a thing. Right. This is one of the nice things about being a composer, is I get to work long and hard on a thing, but generally speaking, if it goes to shit, I dodge all the bullets associated with that. I don't have to bear the brunt of it. But in the flip side, I also don't get credit. I'm not like the reason why it did great if it went great either. So there's, you are that is part of the job. You have to be the kind of walking sales pitch of this thing, including bearing the whips and scorn.
Sure, sure.
I don't even know what I'm asking. I'm just babbling, as
I
I'm
mean, it
prone to
sucked.
do.
It sucked for sure, but I think it was just, it just had unfortunate timing. I think the leaks didn't help. The pandemic didn't help. It was right when everybody was filled with so much rage, at our circumstances of everything, and it gave an outlet for that, I think. And it just, yeah, the timing of it just sucked. I think looking back on it, that there's certainly, I get enough messages about it, that people that had that sort of reaction to it when it came out and then have gone back and played it now or played it again and do not have the same reaction to it. Maybe it was just a matter of, acclimating to Abby after, having such a mournful response to a beloved character, which I totally get. Like, Joel is incredibly important to so many people. And to take that character away from them creates rage. And if you don't, like, our goal, my job as Abby was to make the audience empathetic towards her, to understand, right? If it didn't happen, then I didn't do my job for them, or maybe they just weren't ready for the message.
How do you decide which of those two things? Because there's a real big difference, the like coming around this person who the game goes overtime to frame as the villain and to like really work hard to make you hate, and then go, okay, now pause. We're going to try to clean slate this. And it's like, I remember when I was playing it, I thought it's very obvious what they're trying to do here. And then it just wore me down. And I thought, it's like, by the time you're back in the theater, I was having like this emotional crisis because even seeing the trick.
And you shouldn't root either. Like
you're just desperate to like come between them and go, we can talk this through.
Give it up. Just give it up. Don't keep going on this cycle. Yeah. And that's the point, right? Sure. I mean, I was the same way. When I was playing it, I got to Abby and I was like, ugh, I was so mad. I was so mad at myself, and I was mad at my performance, and I didn't want to play as me. I mean, like, I had all of the same emotional reaction that the rest of the audience did. And
is that rare? Are you able to play games? Are you able to kind of separate like that?
Sometimes if I hear too much of myself in a performance, then I don't want to play it. But it's like, I feel like Abby's far enough away from me. Just like the physical, just like my motions for her, my movements for her were very stylized, and my voice was different than my own. So I was able to see it as another character.
Right.
Whereas sometimes I'm like, oh, that's just me. Stop it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to pretend like I get it. I'm not an actor, but I can't really play the games that I score because all I notice are,
I could have done this, I could have done that.
It's just like 1,000 little things of either actively wishing I had done something different, or I get lost in my own thoughts going, oh, it's funny. I remember debating between those two takes, and I wonder if I did in fact pick the right. And it's like and then suddenly I realize, oh shit, what did I miss? You get kind of the ability to kind of shut all that off, as I almost never can do. And I would have thought that on a game like The Last of Us, it's fundamentally, it's fascinating that the distance from how you see yourself is the defining thing, because you were so invested, clearly. Like, it took so much to do that I would think it would have the most extreme version of not being able to play. But it makes sense that it's actually the opposite, that you're so thoroughly, thank God, not Abby, that it's almost like watching somebody else. I would think, or at least I'm paraphrasing how you said it.
I mean, no, yeah, that is what it's like. There were maybe 2 moments in the game that I was like, "Oh, I should have done this." Where like I remembered the moment and thought I should have done a different choice. But
Interesting.
even brought it up to Neil. He's like, "No." I was like, "All right, fine."
Yeah. Well, that is, I guess, we are ultimately we have to trust our collaborators that they see the best.
100%. 100%. It's his vision at the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. It's fascinating how a game of that scale can feel very personal to one person to Neil. I mean, because it takes so many people to make a game like that, and everybody's contributing a lot and putting a lot of themselves in it. And so,
Yes.
I totally get when people reject the kind of auteur Neil made The Last of Us kind of framing, but there's not one speck of it that's not doesn't have this like fingerprints of his thinking. You know what I mean? It's kind of shocking that something of that scale can be made and feel so personal to one person in that way. But in any case, I know you have to leave sort of soon, so I will selfishly indulge a couple minutes of getting your take on Stray Gods because it hasn't come out yet. So we don't know. It could be that it'll be hilariously disastrous and everyone's gonna be like, "The fuck is this?" And we'll all be licking our wounds. But I hope not. I certainly can tell you this: no one is gonna find issue with any of our performances, not least of which you. That was far and away a project that's so built around like a disproportionate amount of my influence. I'm not used to living in that much of a driver's seat on projects. Normally my job is to support and less to be in any remote version of a driver's seat. And so when people ask like, what was the highlight for you? There's a lot of different things to think about, but I always come back to the 6 months or so with the cast was far and away my favorite part of the whole project. Like nothing comes close because I was the most out of my league and just mostly kind of just witnessing magic seemingly every day.
All of us felt out of our league and it came together. Like,
well, so, okay. So, yeah, I mean,
you asked me about games that like I realized I was in over my head. This would probably be the one that like I did the first session. It was like, oh dear Lord, I don't know if I can do this.
I will say you never came across as someone who can't do it. But when I look at the beginning versus the end, your arc of kind of wrapping your arms around it is very feelable. And it doesn't show up in the performances because we always got there, but we definitely got there faster. And you played with things, you know, after one take instead of after 3 or whatever, you know, by the time we got to the end, like you really owned it. And it so couldn't be anybody else now. Like it would be something different entirely if it was a different a different actor. But I don't know, you know, because I remember you saying something like, you know, I sing to my son. That's sort of my singing experience. Yeah. Like that's my singing claim. Were you tempted to not do it? Because it was like, oh, by the way, we're going to need you to sing like 50,000 hours.
No, I mean, I love singing. I do, you know, and I did like musical theater in school and stuff. It was just like, for some reason over the past decade, I don't know, I got more and more nervous singing in front of people. Like I've gotten so like timid about it. And I don't know why. I don't know where it came from, but it just started happening. I feel like more of your soul is on the line. Like it's more bare when you're singing than
anything else. That's the whole idea.
Oh, it's hard. So yeah, I was just nervous that I wasn't going to be able to to be as good, because I knew that the cast, you guys got amazing people on this project,
really
and I was like, how am I going to live up to, you know, Merle effing Dandridge, who's just what, and that's just all that was going on in my brain. It was like, I just shouldn't be the one doing this.
She really taught me not to overshare. Because she was very patient, but it was like I could feel that I would go, here's kind of what I'm thinking. She's already clocked the note and she's just letting me finish the sentence, but everything past the third word was not necessary. And she was just ready to go again and didn't want to accidentally like say anything that would make me keep going. And so I just really, yeah, I'm saying this in the best way. Like I learned a lot, but she was so ready for battle all the time.
So on. She's so good.
Yeah. It's kind of scary. And yeah, it was
for sure.
Do you have any, was there anything about it? Were there any kind of, I'm curious like what sticks out basically from the process.
Well, I mean,
you?
Yes, I agree with your statement that like by the end of it, it was just like it was fun. Like by the end of it, I was like looking forward to the sessions and like getting ready to like, what can we do with the music, and then it felt like collaborative and fun and creative. And whereas when we first started, there was just so much terror going in. And it was so much of like, oh God, I just felt like in over my head because, Troy would be like, no, and you too would just be like, no, just play with it. Just just sing whatever, you want to sing right here. And I just couldn't grasp what you even meant. I was like, I don't know how to change the notes. I don't know what you mean play. Like, give me tell me what to sing and I will sing it. Whereas, I think over the 6 months to a year by the end of it, I was like, oh, okay, we're just playing. This is fun. And if it sucks, then it sucks. And we just don't use that take. So the pressure was off. I think it felt better. It felt right.
Did you, along the lines of that, when you earlier were saying that sometimes you feel you can't play a thing because there's too much of you, how much do you feel like Grace ended up on a scale from Abby to Laura Bailey? How much of yourself did it feel like I'm asking, would you be able to play the game and not go, oh my God?
Very much I'm going to play the game. I very, very much want to play the game. So we'll find out. I'll find out once I start doing. I think she's far enough away from my voice, my normal voice that I hear in my head, that it's not like
Right.
when I hear you've been like sharing Drift, and like I played it for Ronan, and he didn't realize it was me singing
Oh wow,
until like it showed my picture singing, and he was like, "Oh, is that you, Mama?" It was great. And I was like, "Yeah," because it doesn't sound like what I would sing. It doesn't. It's like a little bit of a different voice.
Well,
Which makes the pressure off. It's just a little bit of a character voice, so it feels.
That's why that was why I was curious to hear you say that, because I wouldn't have intuited that being the way that you can kind of separate or not. Because I remember before each new actor would join, with really the only exception of Anjali, Troy would almost actively discourage people from feeling like they needed to put on a persona and like be, like Seth MacFarlane becomes Stewie and it's like this whole other human being coming out. And it was like, no, let's try to be a little more organic and natural about it. And it might end up tilting certain ways, but then obviously you have this other challenge of the character's choices with the whole kind of red, green, blue are their emotional states that, demand that we figure out what this character is, including the pendulum of her range.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it still needs to stay true to who Grace is, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be Grace in all of those states.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I would think it requires you, like, that's where I was always fascinated by that direction from Troy, because it seemed like this requires you to kind of invent somebody in order to define that. Because if it's just you, otherwise it's just very you. Like, this is me in kick-ass aggressive mode or not. And now you're not really acting anymore, obviously. And this required that. I mean, it required a huge amount of acting. So that's where the whole thing, again, it's just dark arts to me. Everything, watching you, because there were so many times where you would have that look in your eyes. Like, it's so funny how, I don't want this to come across wrong, but I would be looking on the thing and you would look like, is this okay? Like, it would look very concerned, almost worried.
Austin.
But then you would open your mouth. If I had my eyes closed, I would never have guessed that you looked so worried that you're going to stick the landing. Because then you would sing or speak the lines, and it was like fucking awesome. There's essentially no bad takes. I mean, really not. It was degrees of. I'm not. I mean, of course, there's occasional times where you'd come in wrong, or you'd like, it'd be the wrong note, but you'd always catch yourself. So in my mind, that's like now not a take. So you'd be like, fuck me running. And so it was always just variations on finding it, and that's where I don't know. To me, it was amazing. I promise I'm not trying to like butter you up or like be some sycophant. I hate that shit. It's really just, that's why I was curious to hear more about it from your point of view on the preparation and any of that. Like, obviously I would send you bits to listen to in advance and
hugely helpful. For the entire period of time, basically, that we worked on this, I didn't listen to the radio. I anytime
I didn't know that.
I would be listening to what you had sent me, so I could just be as familiar with the music as possible. I think that also is what made it more comfortable to be able to play with it, is knowing what I was going to be singing. Do you know what I mean? Like, once I knew where it needed to be, then it was okay to, to let loose a little bit.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't want to abuse your time. There's so many more things I could unpack about it, but I'm all too happy to have just been a nice little cross section of all the different things that you've done, and I feel very lucky to have been able to do this thing together, because it was really 5 years ago. This bucket list, like, wouldn't it be crazy to do a musical that the players get to drive?
I can't believe it happened.
Honestly, I can't either. I can't believe that we were able to do it at the level we were, because, again, it all comes back to the cast. That is what matters in a musical. Is who the audience doesn't ever know what we wrote. They only know what comes out of the speakers, and the thing that comes out of the speakers are the performers. So all the behind the scenes and whatever it took to get there is irrelevant. All that matters is what hits their ears, which is you guys, all of you. Even things like the backing tracks and shit that I had to kind of spend another year and a half killing myself over really doesn't matter anywhere near as much. And all that was in service of the performances anyway. Like, all that was just there to give you a platform, basically. It's not really about anything else. And the fact that we just got such a dream team, but so much of it. I mean, you were 50% of our 5 million sessions. I mean, it was literally, there's no moment of this without you. So, I know that you're no stranger to high stakes and carrying a thing. I mean, The Last of Us is on such a whole other level in every dimension. But still, I was just amazed, and I'm so grateful that you said yes and rose to the occasion so well, despite repeatedly saying things like, you all made a terrible choice in casting me. Anyway, I don't want to steal any more of your time. But thanks for hanging and letting me ask you a bunch of, what'd you say?
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, no, it's fun. It's such a weird indulgence that, 90% of my host duties on this podcast are talking to fellow composers, but I get to be the kind of James Lipton for the actors, as well as like a fun little indulgence. So I was very excited to do this. Thank you so much for making the time. I hope folks can accept singing Abby.
Don't think of it as Abby. Don't think of it as Abby.
They will have no trouble with that. No, seriously though, thank you so much.
Thank you.